finally, when we get to the condition of written language disabilities, more specifically writing, so dysorthographia, what that would look like in a student is a high number of spelling errors. So we're going to have a student whose entire cognitive resources are going towards trying to figure out how to spell a word. And what's going to happen is they'll have very few resources left to produce a rich text that's informative and entertaining and everything else that we would look for in our students' written productions. And we could also have a situation where the child is now also having difficulty in terms of the more of the mechanics, so that there will be grammatical errors, punctuation errors, difficulty with paragraph construction, etc. Here's an example of a grade 4 child with dyslexia and dysorthographia. So the task here was the child had to write a text that I dictated to him. The text is at the bottom of the slide. This is a child, unfortunately I don't have an example of this type of an activity in a second language. So this is in the child's first language. This child has perfect vision, corrected vision, perfect hearing, and above average IQ, first language speaker of French. And if we look at this text and look at what he was supposed to write, he was supposed to write, je vais vous raconter l'histoire d'un petit garçon qui s'appelle Joe. Il vit chez son oncle, un vieux monsieur qui vit dans un bourg. So some of the things that are going on here. So first of all, this is very typical of a student with dyslexia, dysorthographia. This is the dysorthographic piece, the written piece. What we see is firstly that it really breaks down more and more as the text progresses. And that's not unusual to see. The students, enter panic mode. They struggle with one word, get stuck on it, and then they start sort of panicking about the next piece that they have to write. And so we often see sort of this degradation over time. We see that the word boundaries are off. Mon oncle, that word boundary has been eliminated. We see some letter sound errors. If we look at s'appelle Joe, so this boy wrote s'appelle, so the P became a B. We see that a lot. Then we see some nice surprises like garçon, that's well written, despite the fact that it has the complex on sound and the CCD that are somewhat tricky to learn. But this is a high frequency word, and that boy is a boy or a garçon, and so this is a word that he would know well. So this is actually quite typical of what we would see in students. In this case, there's also a calligraphy issue there that is not always present in the case of dysorthographia, but it definitely can be. Just to give you a comparison, this is a typically developing child who's one grade below the child that I just gave you an example for. So it's not a perfect text, but there are far fewer errors than in the case of the first child. Here is another task that is often given to children who struggle with encoding or have dysorthographia. So in this case, we give them words that are not real words. So sometimes we do this in reading. We give them a list of words and we say, now these are not real words, but I want you to read them as if they were real words. And in this case, I said these are not real words, but I'd like you to write them as if they were real words. And these errors are typical, again, of a child with dyslexia. So we have what's called voicing errors. So I said gontra, and the child wrote condra. So the g sound he hears as a k sound, and the t sound he hears as a d sound. And we see this throughout his writing here. I said copage, he wrote cobage. So the p he heard as a b. And at first, when I started practicing, I found this striking, and I didn't understand how this could not be related to hearing, but it's really not a hearing issue in most students, although we need to make sure that hearing and vision are optimal, but we often see these types of errors in our students. And here's a typically developing child performing the same task. This child is 1 year below the other child, so a neurotypical child, where we see that the letter sound correspondences are certainly acquired by grade 3.